need for medication, the need for medication is, you understand when we talk about antibiotics in particular, we had the use of antibiotics in the past in the EU, now forbidden, a use of antibiotic that was done to accelerate the growth of the animals. And for example, and in addition to center the fact that many of the intensive system, for example, milking the cows, were creating mastitis and situation of infection that were chronic, that were compensated with the use of medication. This is not helping at all in terms of also another area I'm responsible of coordinating, that is in fact the fight to what we call a silent pandemic, that is in fact the antimicrobial resistance. Last but not least, the biodiversity. And another example is again the human-animal relation and the resilience of the system. We saw that practically during this COVID pandemic, the area, and I have to say, I used to spend my holidays in Sardinia. Sardinia is a place where, in fact, a family frequently owns animals, frequently is having oil produced by themselves, and all the rest. This means also that the animals they preserve are animals that are very much adapted to their territory, and they are very much likely to survive in case of a difficult situation like climate. And at the end of the story, because they are adapted to their territory, these are enriching the biodiversity of the different regions of Europe. We have millions of breeds that have disappeared because of the intensification. So now, this was a big introduction, but I wanted to give you really the incredible task that we have with these 3 lines. Next slide. I will be now more shorter and more operational on the next. Where are we with animal welfare in the European Union? We are, in fact, with the stronger system of legislation that we know in the world. Norway is exactly fitting the same, even better. So the approach of Norway is the same with the EU. Basically, people are looking into welfare to be seen in a legislative requirement. It means also that, practically speaking, private initiatives are there in Europe everywhere, but we have, as Europeans, a credo saying clearly we prefer legislative benchmark, and we need this. So we have 5 directives and 2 regulations, dating some from the 90s. The Farm to Fork strategy is clearly saying that we will revise this, because in fact, in particular the transport, are dating from the beginning of this century. So a lot has been developing, and also we have not only new technologies, but we know more about enforcement. So we will, and we have gone to the European Food Safety Authority requesting them to provide recommendation and reports on the state of the art of the science for all the area we are covering with legislation. And in conclusion, we are tending to look for a proposal or more in 2023, you will see, that will amend all the current state of the art for the current legislation. This will affect also your country in a certain sense, because as you know, we have a parallel enforcement of the same requirement in the agreements between the countries, the EU and Norway. Fitness check is a word we use in what is called the big frame of the better regulation process. In few words, it means we have to look into if the current legislation is in fact responding and is still fit to the needs of today. And so this is the big question that we have raised. Next slide. Allora, to do that, we have a very sophisticated process. This process is in fact, first of all, starting with the document you see in this picture, that is the Inception Impact Assessment. It is a document of 5-6 pages that allows, having discussed and consulted with the people, and internally to describe where we like to go. We would like to go to revise the legislative frame that we saw. And for this, we have effect to describe in this document the policy options. We list them there. For example, the ban of the use of cages for the future, or the prohibition of transport over 35 degrees for high temperatures, for example. These are options that definitely will not be mandatory part of our proposal of legislation. We need first to know what people think. We need to know if they are feasible from the economic and technical point of view. And last but not least, if we are responsible really for it in Brussels, so a principle of proportionality. This first step was this document was on the web from 6 July to 24 August for 7 weeks. And we have received 983 contributions. And fantastic to say, we had a big number of organizations, more than 200. That is very important. From NGOs to farmer organizations from all over Europe, but also private citizens. And it's fascinating that 582 came from Poland. So it's quite interesting to see that countries that were not at the forefront of animal welfare, that was something we brought in a certain sense in terms of legislative acquis to Poland when there was the accession in 2005. These are now elements in which citizens take the time to go on the web during the month of August and write what they think after having examined this document. And this is quite a fascinating element. Then we are analyzing the feedback we have received, and it's not finished because, in fact, in the last quarter of 2021, starting probably from the 10th of October, we have prepared a questionnaire for everyone that is developed in all languages and is in fact picking up from this policy option and asking in a more systematic and straight manner, this information and the contribution to the citizens. All this will all consolidated and will be further presented and discussed in a conference that is will be open with connection for everyone. I hope you will be able, if interested, to join on the 9th of December. I can also announce that this is an event that looks to be very interesting for many aspects, not only because we will have a complete overview of what the people feel about this, but we will have people like Jane Goodall, for example, opening and addressing the audience. So it will be quite an interesting perspective on what's next. New slide. As I mentioned, we have not the possibility to move ahead without the science. And if there is an area of research that is booming in the veterinary area, connected also with the team we spoke about sustainability and so on, is in fact the area of animal welfare and the connected sciences. So we have to know what's going on and to be as much as possible updated to reflect this in what we could do in the legislation. That's why we have requested EFSA to provide, in fact, reports and recommendations on transport, pigs, broiler, ling, hens, and cows welfare. These are the main elements of the current legislation, but we have been also requested to work on more species and on other areas. So many other mandates are in the pipeline, and this strong demand is in a way so big that probably we will have a calendar of work with EFSA that will keep us busy for the next 10, 20 years. Anyway, next slide. Let's speak about now an important happening that we have been living through. The European Treaty allows the European citizens to sign together what are called European Citizen Initiative, means a call to the Commission and the institution to act upon a certain subject. In 3 years ago, some organization in the European Union started to collect signatures to phase out and prohibit the use of cages for farm animals, in particular for the species you see in the slide. Laying hens, calves, pullets, broiler breeders, and so on. This, as you can imagine, is a quite ambitious and revolutionary call. But was signed, in fact, by 1.3 million of citizens. Is the 6th largest European citizen initiative we ever received and was submitted from the Commission. What happened when we received this type of call? The Commission has the duty to analyze this proposal and to analyze its feasibility, to see if it's not yet done even, it happened already, but in fact to engage and respond. We have been working on it for the whole beginning of 2021. To be honest, for me it's been fascinating because we have to reply to a question here and a demand that is a real challenge when you think about the billions of animals that are raised in cages in the European Union, and to see all the different components. So what is the next step after we receive this? We discussed also with the people that represented this initiative, are NGOs that are international, in fact, the leading, representing many member states. And we went to elaborate a Commission communication that replied saying that the Commission will look to prepare legislative proposal by the end of 2023 to phase out and finally prohibit the use of cages for the species referred to the initiative that you see. Of course, when it will happen is important to say we have not yet an answer, because in fact the length of the transition period will be the result of an impact assessment and the consultation. And in fact, we need also the science to replace certain systems with others. For some, the process already ongoing, like for the laying hens, but not for all. Next slide. One of the other elements that are mentioned and is connected with all the things we said till now is the issue of labeling. What happened? The farm-to-fork strategy engaged the Commission to study and to see if any option would be necessary or important for labeling food on the basis of the way we treat the animals. And in addition, there are also in the pipeline the idea of develop a sustainable lab. As we are today, the work is started, and we have already to say one thing. Today we have only one labeling system for welfare that is mandatory in the European Union. It's concerning the fresh eggs. And it was in fact because of the ban on the non-enriched cages that we had so many years ago, and allows you to choose the type of farming system on the egg, because on the stamp of the egg you have a number that is telling you which type of farming you have. Oh, now, this is the only mandatory one, but this is not the situation as it is in a supermarket, because in fact, we have several labeling systems that have been developed in Europe by public-private partnership in certain cases, private in certain others, that are 13, we counted at least only from 2010. So we have now more and more voluntary systems that are coming to be really driving the market. And the demand of this is from a Eurobarometer survey already from some years ago, the trend probably is increased, is that 52% of these consumers are looking for this information. So we have now a big challenge. The challenge is really how we will put together, and if it will be needed, a label, a European level, to harmonize or consolidate so many labels that are developing. But the last and not easy question on the table is what we will do with the products we import. Because of course, the big question mark is what will be and what is the way animals are farmed abroad, and if there will be a competitive situation that put a disadvantage at the welfare in a certain sense. But all this is also connected with the ethical dimension. Don't forget this. So it's a question where consumers, as citizens in Europe, expect for a moral ground that animals are treated well. And that's why we have to study exactly how we could help this. Meantime, also, and you see in this slide, here on the right, we have created also an EU platform for animal welfare that has been working already since several years, where stakeholders and member states are meeting together, and they are developing, in fact, several documents that are available on the web and guidelines to improve the implication of the current law, but also, like in the case of labeling, they've been studying the situation and proposing, giving a little bit the snapshot of what was the clear state of play with the labels. This is also available online. It's a big resource website for welfare, of course. So this is for the labeling. I think on the next, and I think we are going to the end. In fact, we have a last chapter. I briefly introduce it. Is the chapter related to, and I mentioned, what happens with the countries that are our trade partners, from the United States to China. It's not a secret. We import food, processed food, from many places in the world, mainly fish, where in fact we have practically no welfare requirements. But we have egg products, we have pig meat. There are several products that are imported in the European Union. Not so much beef. Actually, the beef we import is organic, practically, so high welfare standards. So, where we go with it? Okay, since long time, we started, for a reason that is also demanded by the citizens, to bring information, knowledge about welfare abroad. And we have been creating bilateral activities with non-EU countries like Chile, New Zealand, Australia, and other Canada and others. We have created cooperation groups in which also not only political and administrative cooperation, but also technical arguments have been exchanged. So we have even common projects that were developed, and this is helping to increase, in particular, the legislation on animal welfare in these countries to put it more in line with our situation. We have also multilateral activities, and not less important, with organizations like the OIE, the World Animal Health Organization, OIE, the FAO, and other, in which we are trying to make this multilateral organization able to bridge our standards with the global standards, to make an understanding of it, and also to organize as possible initiative and training capacity. Why is important? Because in fact, this is also a platform, I mean the multilateral organization, where practically you have capacity also to see the equilibrium between the different state of development in the different countries for welfare, but also their interest in trading abroad. The work here in the list is also with the World Bank, for example, and the International Finance Corporation, where they are monitoring what we are doing in Europe to englobate, aggregate welfare requirement into their projects. Not last, but not a minor thing is also that the training and assistance we produce for their country, as we produce for the EU, has been part of an ambitious program that is still ongoing, that is called Better Training for Safer Food, BTSF. Sorry for the acronym. and then it's brought also through TAIEX, that is our technical advisory system for, in fact, countries that are looking into neighboring us and looking for accession. Now, so we have a new element in the picture, and we are concluding, but this is the new for the future and promising, is the need to, because we are creating such an ambitious program of reform and to raise more the standards, we are now going to include the possibility to develop green alliances on sustainable food systems in our way to negotiate in bilateral and globally. This is important because there will be practically a farm-to-fork chapter that will become part of each trade discussion. And as I said, all in the frame of sustainability. So welfare is coming reinforced in terms of this, for the ethical dimension one, but also for its connection with the sustainability area. These together are becoming, practically speaking, the strength we are having globally. And thank God, we have to say, we are talking about things we know, because with welfare, as I said, we have developed so much. It's connected to it also what is called the antimicrobial resistant pattern, in which we have engaged for food-producing animals to reduce by 50% the use of antibiotics in the European Union. From the monitoring, things are going well in the EU, and the number of and the quantity of antibiotics is diminishing. We have a national action plan and reporting systems that allows us to calculate it. But at international level, the engagement to get the same done abroad, that is important too, is something more complex. So this is, I think, my last slide. The next, I think, is just closing. In fact, I hope I try to be on the time. So if you have a question, with pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You can hear us? Yes,
fine. Very well.
Yeah, first I need to adjust a little bit my adjectives because sometimes in Norway we use good and very good for excellent and outstanding. That's just our culture. So I have to adjust a little bit on that. So thank you very much for this excellent outstanding presentation again. So this is a very important area, and I know that the students are very engaged in this as well, and so much activities going on. So thank you for a very good overview. And then I think the students have some questions for you. So yes.
I have a question because you mentioned about the end of cage system. And in Norway, there is marketing on eggs from free-range hens. On the other hand, there is a discussion about that the free-range system have a higher mortality rate, and there is a risk of infection from wild animals. And how can the Commission handle such challenges about the free-range systems?
Do we go one by one or pick up some, as you prefer?
Yeah, we can do one by one.
Okay. Yes. Well, this one, in fact, was very specific. Yes. First, the fact that we are looking forward to embrace new farming systems that are more welfare friendly means, of course, that we have to use science and technology to cope also with the different elements we have entering into the scenario. What you mentioned about the mortality, honestly, I don't have any data personally to see if on the we have this occurring in the free-range system in Europe. Honestly, I presume that is something that EFSA will tell us. So this is something we will know. But practically, the question is really for the future to bring together our knowledge and our experience in farming and provoke the change. In the sense, a lot of farmers, because of the pressure also of the market, are developing and investing in new technologies. And that is the real thing that is what we want to profit. Because the more these new farming and technology come in and they are in fact assessed as provoking a benefit to the environment and to the sustainability of the food chain, the more are for us the way we will look into a frame of legislation that will help. The issue of mortality and the technical details you mentioned, honestly, will be considered, but we will also see in a time frame in which we will adapt to have the less risk possible. And that's why we do an impact assessment. That is the process and the work of the next year and a half, actually. So how we will do to prevent this, and which way is not yet said, but is one of the targets, surely.
Will the animal welfare revision set demands for meat and fish imported from other countries, for example, Norway?
Oh, well, as I said, Norway is not a country that will ever have a problem in terms of welfare requirements, because Norway practically adhere to our legislative frame, and in particular on this area, actually, on certain species is even inspiring. And I speak about, for example, the killing of fish in terms of salmons and certain welfare procedures. As a consequence, we have a continuous sharing of technology and information, and it will never be an issue with the import from Norway. The problem will be, on the contrary, for Norway too, how it will be the situation with the third country that are in fact trading partner, where the welfare of their production will become lower and lower than the current standard we have in Europe, because for the moment our standards are high but not so high. And that the way we will differentiate, the way we will work on it is, as I said, based on the discussion we have today, because in fact we will have to assess the impacts and for example, if we talk about a label, how it could work and how we could perform controls on that. So is really one of the issues we have in the pipeline. As I said, also in any case, there are other measures that could be considered in terms of aside of the label. That could be, for example, tariff, preferential tariff, for example, for welfare product with high welfare, as it is in current negotiation with the Mercosur for eggs, and so on. So we will see more in detail this in the next 2 years to come.
Karianne?
Hører du meg?
Ja.
Yeah, I wonder, how do you focus on the animal welfare in the aquaculture in this revision? And is there a plan to have a welfare labeling of seafood?
Yes, thank you for the question. It's important, I mentioned, aquaculture is a dimension that because our key is more than 20 years old, aquaculture at that time for welfare was not at the center of it, so much that we have very little requirements for welfare of fish. And even where we have now knowledge, a lot of knowledge, a lot of elements that could become a minimum benchmarking. So we will treat this specifically, and we will surely increase the requirements in terms of adopting really new requirements for aquaculture and farming, a list of certain species that are the most common, like the salmons. This is very important because, in fact, we know that there is a lot at stake. And like, for example, and then is your question, the label. We have labeling already. We have labeling for fish that are including welfare requirements available on the market. Let's see, in fact, if we will build on them and which way we will be able to cope in terms of creating a possible reference at the European Union, so an harmonized way to communicate on labeling or not. This is something I cannot answer now because, in fact, we need to study if it will be convenient.
More questions? Yes.
What about animals that use for production non-food materials?
Like for furs, you mean?
Like
Yes, furs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, thank you for the support here online. It's a pity to be at distance. Sometimes it's not easy to exchange. Now I understood. Yeah. In fact, this is interesting as a question because, first of all, we have had a debate exactly on that with the ministers of agriculture in the council before the summer. The Minister of Agriculture debated exactly a document presented by certain delegation of the EU. One was Sweden, one was the Netherlands and Austria, I think, in which this minister proposed to discuss if it was legitimate to ban the farming for fur in the European Union. First, because when you keep a mink in captivity, in this paper, is the paper from these three countries, in captivity, it's very hard to reach a minimum welfare acceptable for the animals. And second, and that's the novelty of the discussion that I underlined to you, and I think interesting for the career and the work you're doing, is the fact that they raise the issue of an ethical concern. The ethics of farming an animal and killing it with the cost on the animal, on the environment and the rest, just for a luxury good as it is a fur. It's a revolution to have such type of question posed to the Council of Ministers of Agriculture, because to be clear, it's putting some entire approach, in this case, in fact, is production of certain type of goods in question, and not just discussing about the rentability and the economics of it. So you understand that the shape of the discussion could turn completely different. The important information I can give you is that they were not alone, the ministers of these three countries in the council, to configure the possibility to phase out the farming for fur. Some of them also because, as you know, minks have been seen as a reservoir for the COVID virus, developing this disease themselves. As a consequence, a risk. So it's an interesting situation. For us at the moment, they are considered in the farming as any other animal. They are covered by a general directive, that is the directive from '98. So it's a general directive where we have a minimum requirement requested for their farming and experienced, and that the farmer must know what he's doing. Not so much, but this is where we are. Let's see in the future how we will work. In fact, in the inception impact assessment, the document I show you, one of the options, you can go and see it on the web, proposed to the people of the EU was if you see this option of phasing out, prohibiting the farming for fur, something good or not to be done in Europe. This is not something, as I say, voting to be in or out. No, it's just to give you your opinion to be considered in an impact assessment further. to be honest. It will not be binding on what we will do, but just to tell.
Thank you. Yes.
I have a question. I'm wondering a bit about the implementation of these directives and rules about, and is there a time frame, and you expect a different, I mean, is there great variance in how long the member countries are expected to implement these new incentives, or I mean new directives, and also what opportunities do you have for governance, for sanctions, or so on and so forth?
Very good question. Thank you for this question. Very good question. Indeed, I was meeting the farmer this week on this, and I've been surprised by what they told me in a certain sense. We have an experience of welfare that dated from the 90s. And what was happening in the 90s was that, practically speaking, people in the street, but also the ministers supported by these people, were seeing the need of change for a farming system that was no more acceptable, like cages for laying hens, imagine, or the tethering of sows. So they were enacting these in legislative tools, like a regulation or a directive, with a period of implementation that was like 12, 15 years. So practically you are having a transition, supposing the legislation. What happened in reality? In the reality, we saw for the laying hens, for example, decided in 99, that we were in 2010, and we discovered practically that the farming industry for laying hens practically moved 10% of it to non-cage system. They were totally unprepared. Actually, the consequence was a drama at the last minute, with like 20 member states out of control, and an entire system of production close to collapse. The system now, and this is what they told me, the situation now that we are planning this reform with new standards is totally changed, in the sense that farmers are discussing exactly how to be part of the game in this decision. So to bring all the elements, economic and technical, that could allow us to start from day one to implement these requirements, and going step by step to the full implementation. So to have a gradual and concrete way of acting. The unfortunate is that today I cannot answer immediately to your question, because it will depend by the different systems. The big challenge will be really the combination between the economics, the trade issue, and of course the way citizens will be able to support this in their interest, also in buying the food that is produced with higher welfare standards. So to bring back a relevant gain to the different to the farming. This is why we have to compensate with the EU Common Agricultural Policy. Implementation is also to be supported clearly, and we have instruments, but not only. And that the understanding is also important.
Thanks.
Thank you very much for the good dialogue, good questions, and good answers. Very, very interesting, and I learned a lot. And I think maybe the students learned a lot too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you very much, and hope to see you again next year.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure. I have to say, very, very good question. And definitely, I hope next time even that the dialogue will be the major part of the business. We will be in the middle of this transition. We will have a lot of questions for you. So it could even be a good interactive possibility, because we need ideas. A revolution as the one we have in mind needs smart thinking and very young attitude, to be honest. And we are already too old for it.
And Andrea, if I may comment on your last comment, and I would like also Eva to confirm this. As I told you when we discussed your participation here, in NTNU, we are currently working in somehow shaping in a better way the amount of critical mass of knowledge that we have. So with Eva, and being Eva a leader of it, we have launched an internal so-called food forum that collects all the competencies in all possible fields that NTNU has linked to the food sector. This is called the NTNU Food Forum and is a forum of more than 100 professors which are coming from all the faculties of NTNU and can provide inputs in social sciences rather than digital, rather than natural science, aquaculture. It's really the supermarket of food knowledge, if I may say, that we can offer to the system. So taking your provocation and based on the dialogue that we had, I propose that you keep in your mind, in a box of your mind, the possibility maybe to exploit NTNU as a source of inputs if you think works for your next step. So feel free to get in touch, and I think that we can discuss with Eva the best way to mobilize our knowledge to provide, why not, our contribution in the policy shaping that you are currently doing and foreseeing for the future. That's, I don't know, Eva, if you want to add anything on this.
Yes, I agree with you, Massimo, and with all these different disciplines working together, it's so much knowledge building, and to collaborate in that way, I think it's a very good opportunity to gain knowledge and collaborate. So, yeah.
Okay.
Definitely. Thank you for this, Massimo. It's really, I think the next year and a half, we are having, in fact, as you know, the development of an impact assessment all around this issue. And as I said, I think everyone from the question are on the same line. The pattern is very horizontal when we talk about welfare, because there is really a bridge between really the impact of our human-animal bond on how we consume and how we farm that is having directly an impact on the environment. So all these elements are so new, despite the real thing, because the equation is the most logical equation we can have. But in fact, it was never seen in such a broader context. So that's why we will need a lot of capacity to analyze and come out with solutions that are not yet all in our hands. On the contrary, that's why I was saying is also we need young ideas to bring in. Definitely.
Thank you again for your participation also from my side.
Yeah, I would say it would be also interesting if, and this is an invitation, you could reflect if you could be as a part of this, with this intelligence you are creating, presenting this idea in the conference that we will have in December. We will talk later. It will be the 9th of December, and we can have an exploratory talks to see where it could fit. We are drafting now the agenda of the day, and it will be, as I said, an important moment of reflection on what's next.
I think is something that I don't want to speak for Eva, but from the Brussels office perspective, I would say yes. Then, of course, from the content perspective, we have to see what Eva thinks, but I suspect that she will be also keen to do it.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
We are very keen to do it. So yes, we are from Trondheim.
Okay,
yeah.
Let's be in touch in the next days, as we said, and define better this.
Good. Thank you very much, Andrea, for the kind offer. And
with pleasure.
Wish you a great day. We have in the room your colleague Anne-Laure GASSIN.
Hello.
Here, so maybe she can come in the camera to say hello to you.
Well, we don't see each other in real for a long
here,
time.
You know, so.
It
was a good time. We were sharing coffee in the canteen. Yeah. I hope they will come back soon.
I hope to see you. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So
we give the break.
I leave the platform to you. I don't want to invade your space. Sorry, I didn't go too much.
Thank you, Andrea. It's perfect. Have a nice day.
Bye bye to you.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, so we have to break now, and then we start. Good.
Yes.
So I sit here.
You sit here, yeah? then I can zoom in. And then, still 1 minute to go. No. Okay. I 2:15. Eva, you are ready on your side?
Yes, we are ready here.
Great. So we, as you notice, we are very emotional because after 1 year and a half, we have a real guest in our premises. So I would like to thank you for giving us the opportunity to have also some direct live interactions with the colleagues from the European Commission. So near to me, there is Anne-Laure, which is the team leader for food waste in the Farm to Fork Strategy Unit of DG SANTE. And Anne-Laure is going to talk to you about the reducing food loss and waste. So let me do this to show you her on the screen. And now we're going to share a presentation. Anne-Laure, before sharing your presentation, I would like to introduce you Eva Falk. Eva Falk is the professor which is responsible for the study course that is benefiting from your presence. And from my side, I would like to thank you a lot, but I would like also to give the floor to Eva for some initial welcome words.
Yes, thank you very much for joining us and sharing your knowledge on this interesting area. And I know that also some of the students are working on master thesis on food losses and waste. And this is, yeah, of course, very important for all food and all the students' job later on. So thank you very much. My own research area is food loss. So I'm particularly interested in this part and look forward to it. So thank you very much, everyone.
Good. So Anne-Laure, now we share your presentation.
Okay.
The floor is yours.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much to Massimo, Eva. Thank you very much for this kind invitation. It really is a pleasure to be here, and as Massimo was saying, also to be here physically. It's quite something. I think it's my, honestly, yes, it is my first meeting with externals since COVID. So it really is, it's quite an experience today. But I very much welcome this opportunity to share with you what we are doing at EU level to contribute to the global fight against food loss and waste. What I would like to do in this presentation is to share with you the work that we have undertaken since 2015. First, as part of a circular economy action plan, and now also new initiatives as part of the Farm to Fork strategy. So some of you, as I understand, and Eva, you in particular, are working in this area. So I'm sure that you're quite knowledgeable, and I want to acknowledge up front also how active Norway is in this on this challenging area of reducing food loss and waste. And Norway and the consortium, the MATVET consortium, you probably know, are active members of our EU platform on food loss and waste. So you'll know that food waste has been identified as one of the greatest sources of inefficiency of our food system, and hence reducing food waste is an essential prerequisite, an essential foundation for building a sustainable food system. Hence the need to have reflected in the Farm to Fork strategy a key action plan in this area. You'll know that also I imagine that reducing food waste brings many benefits, sometimes called a triple win, because clearly by fighting food loss and waste in the food supply chain, we save food. We save food that would otherwise go wasted, which is really a crime in a world where many people are still hungry and undernourished. Reducing food loss and waste also brings economic benefits, not only to operators in the food chain, but also to ourselves as citizens. And of course, there is an important environmental and climate impact associated with food waste, which can be addressed. So this is what we're aiming to contribute to. Next slide, please. And in doing so, As again, I'll be saying this throughout. I'm sure that you're also very much aware of the Sustainable Development Agenda, the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs as the acronym is. And when we seek to achieve this target, the SDG target 12.3 of having global food waste at retail and consumer levels and reducing food losses, we indeed are contributing not only to resource efficiency and to environmental objectives, but also helping in the fight against, in the climate action initiatives, addressing the Zero Hunger SDG 2, and as mentioned, also there are economic benefits to be gained, of course, from ensuring greater resource efficiency. Next slide, please. So these are the latest, most comprehensive data set as regards quantification of food waste in the EU. We are now in the process, and I'll come back to that, but through new legal obligations in the waste legislation, the waste directive since 2018, member states have an obligation to reduce food waste, to monitor and report on food waste levels. So we will be, as of 2022, as of next year, we will have new data. But today, the most accurate and comprehensive reflection of food waste in the EU at the time, including the UK, is annual generation of 88 million tons of food waste per year, equivalent of 20% of all produced food was the estimate of this Fusions EU funded research project. Economic impact of 143 billion euros and estimated contribution to total EU emissions at the level of 6%. So this is, and importantly, over half of food waste is generated at the level of households, which is a key focus area for many member states. Next slide, please. So what have we achieved? Firstly, let me go through the first Circular Economy Action Plan that was adopted in 2015, take you through what we've achieved, and then we'll go to the Fond de Fork strategy. So this was the first dedicated action plan at EU level to tackle this issue. And this action plan called on the Commission firstly to set up a multi-stakeholder platform, bringing together actors from both public and private sector to work together to share best practice as regards food loss and waste reduction, and also advise on EU level action that should be undertaken. So we established this platform in 2016, and we are in the process of re-establishing it. I will come back to that as well. Secondly, measuring and monitoring food waste. As the adage says, you cannot manage what you don't measure. So we indeed need to know where we are losing food in the food supply chain, why, how much. And so in the context of the revision of the Waste Directive in 2018, new amendments were introduced, specific provisions for member states on food waste reduction, and they require member states to establish national food waste prevention plans. So to reduce the generation of surplus, but also to ensure that if surplus, when surplus is generated, that that surplus first as a priority go for human consumption, and then potentially be used as a resource for feed where possible, it's safe to do so, and before then other non-food uses. So there's a hierarchy also in the waste legislation. But these are, importantly, these are, I believe, worldwide the only legal obligations that exist that require government to measure food waste, to report on food waste. And we adopted in 2019 a common methodology to quantify food waste at each stage of the food supply chain. So now member states are collecting and gathering these data, and the first reporting will be in 2022 by mid next year. Then under the Circular Economy Action Plan, the Commission was also asked to take measures to clarify how EU legislation relating to waste, to food, to feed applies to circularity, and in a circular economy objective, what can be done in order to facilitate that the most food possible goes for human consumption. So what can we do to facilitate food donation, and how can we optimize then the safe use of food also in feed? And that resulted in the elaboration of two guidance documents, one on food donation, and the other on the feed use of food no longer intended for human consumption. And there was wide public consultation, and the EU platform also contributed quite a lot to these documents. And then the last point here is date marking. So this is the date labels on food. I'm sure you're aware, the use by and the best before dates, where misunderstanding, misuse of these dates can lead to food waste. And here also we've undertaken work in order to promote better understanding and use of date marking. And this is being carried over into the Farm to Fork strategy. Next slide, please. So under the Farm to Fork strategy, we are stepping up action. There's 2 legislative proposals which will be coming proposed by the Commission. One by the end of 2023, setting EU level targets for food waste reduction. I'll come back to that in the next slide. Secondly, to revise EU rules for date marking, and I'll also be coming back to explain this in more detail. And this will be proposed by the end of next year. We will also work to further integrate food loss and waste as part of all relevant EU policies. For instance, recently this year, colleagues dealing with food hygiene have introduced some amendments in hygiene legislation, which allow amongst others, allow the freezing of meat at retail for food donation purposes. So just to give you an example of how we're integrating this aspect, this objective in relevant legislation, whilst always, I should say, whilst always ensuring food safety, because there can be no compromise on the safety of the food supply chain, which means protecting both human health and animal health. You've heard from Andrea just now about animal welfare, and indeed animal health is critical. Investigating food losses at the production stage, exploring ways of preventing them is also in the Farm to Fork strategy. Recently under Horizon Europe, we have launched calls, so calls for proposals, instigating research universities and other entities to put forward proposals in this area. And I know Norway has been active in this area as well. Last but not least, continue to scale up action and mobilize key players. And I'll come back and explain what all is involved there. Next slide, please. So the targets. Now, why set targets? Well, you know that the SDG target 12.3 is a very ambitious target. And whilst in the EU, member states have been taking action, we consider that action generally, there are some exceptions, but are not at the level of ambition and the pace which are needed in order to ensure that the EU makes a strong contribution to this global target 12.3. So we want to accelerate the movement by proposing EU-wide targets for reducing food waste. So this will be proposed by 2023. The scope, you see here the definition of food waste. I'm going to explain that a little bit more in the next slide. But this relies heavily on what has been laid down now in a common EU methodology to measure food waste. The exact coverage of the food chain, for instance, by these targets and the levels of the targets will be decided in a proposal from the Commission. In order to define this proposal, we will be, of course, looking very closely at the new data that we're expecting next year from member states. The proposal, as all legislative proposals, will be supported by impact assessment and public consultation. And we expect to launch by the end of this year an inception impact assessment, which will identify already policy options and give the opportunity for stakeholders to give feedback also on the level of ambition. Next slide, please. So food waste, definition and interpretation. So it may seem obvious that when you look at this, it sounds very simple, but actually, as you know, the devil is in the detail. But what is food waste? Well, the regulation which lays down this definition indicates that it's all food as defined under the general food law that has become waste. Okay, so this means when we say that as defined and applied in the general food law, this means that we're referring to the entire food, so including all its parts, both edible and not intended to be eaten. So for instance, meat products, including inedible parts such as bones, attached to that meat will be quantified as food waste. We're not separating for the purpose of the reporting edible and not edible. We can discuss that later, but there's reasons for that. So food then which has become waste, so which the holder, which can be a food business operator or household, discards, intends or is required to discard. Next slide, please. So in developing the methodology, and I must say that it's not myself who did this, but another colleague of ours who is, that's his area of specialization. And in proposing the methodology, we benefited from the very comprehensive work that was done by the Fusions research project, which was the first attempt at quantifying food waste in the EU according to a common definitions framework. So this is what was done to quantify each stage of the food supply chain, and then looking at what food is removed at those stages of the food supply chain and where does it go. If it's subject to waste treatment, then it's quantified as food waste. If you could just press the button again, there's a build on this slide. So next, yeah, voilà. So as part of the of our work on targets and also in the quantification and monitoring of food waste in the EU, it's very much aligned with what has been done at Fusions, but with one notable exception, which is that we impose, of course, on this the legal framework, and the relevant legal framework is EU waste legislation. And under EU waste legislation, food, or I shouldn't say food because it's not food yet, but crops, for instance, which are utilized on farm, which are utilized for other purposes or utilized, let's say, for energy, fall outside of the scope of waste legislation, so are not quantified as waste and hence are not quantified as food waste. So most of the resource, let's say, used in agri-production will not be quantified as waste as such according to in the EU framework. Next slide, please. So we have provided guidance on food waste reporting for member states. And in fact, it is Eurostat in the Commission who is responsible for collecting and validating the data which will be coming from member states. And at this link, you'll find quite a detailed manual that has been developed by Eurostat in order to support member states in their obligations to quantify and report on food waste. There's also best practice examples. On the DG Santé website on food waste, we also have a range of reports and best practice tools that can be used. And we're organizing on a regular basis webinars with member state experts in order to share their experience as member states begin to implement monitoring of food waste. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we turn to date marking. Date marking, so you're aware of these two dates, which we find on food in the EU and also worldwide, use by and best before dates. And we know that consumers, not only consumers, but also sometimes actors in the food supply chain, do not always readily see the difference between these dates. And there's obviously an implication for food waste, because as you know, after a use by date, one cannot market, one cannot consume that food. The food needs to be removed from the market. Whereas after a best before date, in fact, in most instances, the food still can be used if the food has been stored properly, if the package is not damaged. The best before date is there to inform consumers about the quality of the food. But it does not, but after past the best before date does not mean that the food cannot be consumed as such. So these are concepts which on the one hand, underneath in red, you see some results from a Eurobarometer we did in 2015, where the majority of consumers said, yes, we always look at date marking when we're shopping and preparing meals, but then we found that only less than 1 in 2 actually understand its meaning. And the understanding differs according to member states, because the understanding is shaped also by what consumers find in the market. So what we know, for instance, is that in the Nordic countries, in Sweden is an example that I have in my mind, best before labeling is very prevalent. And in fact, today, consumers understand much more best before versus used by, and which can lead actually to some issues, because our colleagues in Sweden tell us that recent research that they've done show that citizens think that after a use by date, they can eat a product, which can create a food safety risk. So you see, it's really important to be able to clearly explain and differentiate between these two concepts. So next slide, please. And this is why throughout the EU and also in Norway, we're very much aware that both public organizations and private sector organizations do run information campaigns, try to inform better consumers on pack, off pack about the meaning of these dates, and in order to help guide appropriate use of these dates. Next slide, please. But as I was mentioning before, so we're going a step further, and the Commission will be making a legislative proposal to revise EU date marking rules. And this in order to avoid food waste linked to misunderstanding, misuse of these dates. Now, obviously, this needs to be informed by not only impact assessment, public consultation, but consumer research. And so we're in the process now of running a pan-EU consumer behavior study in order to better understand how consumers today perceive and use the current date marking rules. We want to identify new ways of expressing date marking in terms of terminology, format, visual presentation, that both meet consumer information needs, but also don't undermine food safety. Because again, you always have to be careful. You can't, we want to prevent food waste, yes, but we need to make sure that consumers are informed about food safety. We can't put food safety at risk. And the best before date, for instance, also gives consumers important information about the quality of a product. So all of this has to be handled quite carefully. And we'll be then testing through a consumer behavior study the effectiveness of possibly new ways of expressing date marking in view then of including them in a legislative proposal. Next slide, please. So I've mentioned the EU platform on food waste prevention, which has been in place since 2016. This has been quite successful, as not only the Commission saying this, but the feedback that we've had from member states. Council last year undertook a progress report on where the EU is as regards making progress towards Sustainable Development Goal Target 1.3. And in this context, member states clearly said that they find the platform to be a valuable forum of exchange and learning about food waste prevention. And based on this and other stakeholder feedback, we decided to reestablish the platform. And we published earlier this summer a public call for expression of interest in view of reestablishing it as of 2022. Next slide, please. So the platform not only has contributed to EU level initiatives like the guidance that I've mentioned on food donation, for instance, but also has produced its own deliverables. And in 2019, the platform adopted recommendations for action in food waste prevention at each stage of the food supply chain, as well as cross-cutting recommendations. And these will be further developed and utilized we hope, by a wide range of stakeholders. The platform I've mentioned seeks to share best practice on food waste prevention, but if we want to be effective in that process, we need to share best practice that shows results. So what we've done, working with the Joint Research Center and the platform in the recent years, is to develop an evaluation framework for food waste prevention initiatives in order to assess their effectiveness on food waste reduction. And I'll come back to that in a minute in the next slide. We're in the process of setting up a dedicated forum on consumer food waste, bringing together both researchers and practitioners in order to, with a view of developing a compendium of best practices in consumer food waste prevention. We'll be launching later this month an EU food loss and waste prevention hub. This will be a build on to our current website. And what we want here is to ensure that all stakeholders can publish resources, initiatives that they're running on food loss and waste prevention. And there will also be in this website a dedicated section on policy where member states will have keep up to date all of the initiatives that they have at country level to prevent food loss and waste. We also at EU level have different mechanisms to support actors in taking action to fight food waste through different funding instruments. And I'll come back to that in the next slide. So next slide, please. So here you have the visual of the report that was published by the Joint Research Center, assessing food waste prevention actions. We're going to repeat that exercise a bit later this year. In fact, the first report was limited in its in the learning that we could gain based on the fact that in fact those who contributed to these food waste prevention initiatives few actually had integrated the evaluation of food waste and food waste reduction. So without measurement, without knowing what reduction was achieved related to a given project, it's difficult then to share learning and to see what is effective. And so we're wanting to continue to build and improve that. And the Consumer Food Waste Forum I've mentioned. So we can go on to the next slide, please. Linked to the recommendations of the platform, we also published a short leaflet targeted for citizens on how to reduce food waste in our daily lives. And this was promoted, for instance, in the context last year of the first International Day of Awareness of Food Loss and Waste, which is the FAO's annual International Day. Next slide, please. So supporting action by key players. Well, food waste addresses economic, environmental, and social aspects. So there are different EU funds that can be utilized to support work on the ground. Regional funds, you have some examples of some of these projects. The LIFE program, which is the research arm to help fund environmental and climate action, has funded projects in this area. And of course, more generally, the EU research and innovation programs, such as you have here Fusions, but also Refresh was a very important project that concluded a couple of years ago. And under Horizon Europe, the Commission has just recently published 2 calls, one focusing on measurement and monitoring of both food loss and waste, with some application deadlines in 2022, and another one with the upcoming application deadline in October, focusing on how to support decision-making to change social norms towards zero food waste, i.e. what can we do that instills behavioral change based on the fact that food waste would no longer be an acceptable behavior as such. So there are proposals being put forward that will be assessed under Horizon Europe, assessed for possible Horizon Europe funding. Single market program here, we will be also supporting member state and stakeholder action through grants to support food waste measurement and prevention. And last slide from my side, next slide please. And at global level, I'm sure you're aware of the many actions which are ongoing. Of course, there are 2 UN agencies who are the custodians of the SDG target 12.3. For food loss, it's the Food and Agriculture Organization, which published a very important report, the so-called SOFA report, State of Food and Agriculture in 2019, where FAO updated its estimation of food loss in the food supply chain. So this is food loss between harvest and retail, up to but not including retail. And the UN Environment Programme in 2021 published its first food waste index report, and they estimated that some 17% of total food available to consumers worldwide in 2019 was wasted at the level of food service, hospitality, retail, and households. UN Environment is also convening regional food waste working groups in various regions of the world, not in the EU because they're of course aware of the EU platform. They're a member of the EU platform. Actually, I didn't speak about that, but members of the platform include UN Environment, FAO, OECD, all the member states, Norway is an observer, and then a range of private sector organizations from farm to fork who are selected following a public call for expression of interest according to the Commission rules on expert groups. So, sorry, that was a parenthesis. But so UN Environment, the regional food waste working groups, and of course the UN Food Systems Summit, where food waste is indeed a key action strand there also, and there are some very ambitious programs put forward, and many countries and industry, NGO coming together, making commitments, creating coalitions to progress the global progress towards the SDG target 12.3 objective. So with that, I think that there's just one last slide, which is basically to say thank you. No, just if you want to stay informed, yeah, please, you can go. Yeah, to stay informed, you'll see in the presentation some links there. Also to a monthly newsletter of the platform. Please feel free to subscribe. And last slide, indeed, just to thank you for your attention. And I'm happy, of course, to answer any questions you might have. I'll do my best at taking any questions that you might have in this area. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much from us. I find your presentation also very motivating, and it's a large teamwork you're presenting. And thank you very much also for a lot of important links you have to find more knowledge. So very good. Or excellent. I think the students have some questions for you, and I start with Karianne.
Yes, do you hear me?
Yes, I hear you fine. Yeah.
You mentioned freezing of meat at the retail. Just wondering what are happening with the freezed meat? Is it used for feed to animals or donated?
Sorry, I'm not sure. What was the second part of your question is what was happening with meat? Sorry.
Yeah, what is happening with the freezed meat? Are you donating it to human or as feed?
Okay. No, indeed. These are, this is in fact a derogation to, in a way, to simplify, to, let me just give you some background on this. Well, first to answer your question, this amendment was done to facilitate food donation. So it's only for food donation purposes. There's always has been a concern about, of course, ensuring traceability of all food, but including meat. And in the food hygiene legislation, it's regulation 853/2004, says that meat should be frozen as soon as possible in the food supply chain, in the production chain. And this, in fact, was in a way precluded or made it very difficult to for retail, let's say, that might have some surplus meat to then be able to give that to a charity, to a food bank for food donation purpose. So over time, with discussion also with member states, our colleagues dealing with the food hygiene legislation, and following also advice from the European Food Safety Authority that provided some advice also in this area of how to ensure safe food donation practices, came to the conclusion that it would be important to allow, under certain conditions, so this is laid down in the hygiene legislation, freezing of meat at retail for the sole purpose of food donation. So you're wanting to ensure, of course, that there's no fraud, that meat is not put on the market, back on the market for other purpose. This is only allowed in order to facilitate the safe transport and redistribution of meat by food banks and other charity organizations.
I experienced that in some stores there is products that have expired already or expired the same day for a reduced price. But it is not so tempting to buy for consumers if the product has already expired or has a little shelf life. So I was wondering if there is any rules or plans for how only the product should be sold before the expiration date to reduce food waste.
Okay, so with regard to expiry date, so indeed after products can be marketed up to the end and used up to the end of the use by date, so which is not the case then for the best before date. They're not these restrictions placed. So with respect to the prevention of food waste, of course, food business operators in the food supply chain, including retailers, manage their stocks very carefully. And more and more you will see retailers, for instance, taking action, implementing promotions or discounting food that when there is a short amount of shelf life of food which is approaching the end of a use by date. Some also are, in fact, retailers anticipate and a few days before will remove products from their shelves in order to make them available to food banks and other charity organizations, so that those food banks will have also sufficient shelf life to be able to redistribute to citizens, to consumers. So this is not the regulatory aspect as such is the fact that one cannot place food on the market past the use-by date, but the practices that are undertaken in order to facilitate marketing of foods or availability of these foods when they become close to the expiry date, those are really left in the hands of the food business operators in managing their supply chains.
I have a question. I'm wondering if, I mean, in your opinion, which segments of the food industry have the easiest to implement a lot of these changes? And conversely, which segments do you think will pose the greatest obstacles in terms of food loss reduction in the coming years?
Good question. I think it's a difficult one it's a difficult question to answer. I think it's relevant. You heard this morning about the code of conduct on responsible business and marketing practice, and there I think it's quite good and comforting to see that certainly the middle part of the chain has, as you saw, integrated objectives to reduce food loss and waste as part of their commitments, most of the industry sectors are really taking action already, and taking action also as member states are implementing national food waste prevention programs. They're forming, as is the case actually in Norway, they're working very closely with all of the actors in the food supply chain in order to set targets, define programs, encourage cooperation between the sectors in order to facilitate food waste reduction. So this is really quite key. Perhaps to say that the area which needs further investigation right now, and you saw that in the context of EU waste legislation, we will not be quantifying. Well, the resources from the agricultural sector that will be quantified as food waste are indeed those resources that are not utilized directly on the farm or utilized for energy. What I want to say is that the area of food loss, and food loss notably pre-harvest, this is an area which really warrants further investigation, further research, more work to be done in terms of defining exactly what we mean by this loss, and in order to define effective strategies to minimize those losses. So in our view in the EU, this is an area of where more research is needed, more investigation is needed, and concerted action is needed.
Thank you.
And of course, sorry, but I'm not speaking here of industry, but the biggest source of food waste right now is happening at consumption. So that is the most challenging area, and that doesn't mean that the strategies are only about how can we change our behavior as consumers. It requires a supply chain approach, but clearly that is the biggest challenge worldwide, because when we see that the UNEP report that I was quoting, for instance, one of the key learnings from there, we used to think that food waste at consumption was more of a problem in the developed world, quote unquote. But what they've seen is, regardless of the level of economy of a country, that food waste at consumption seems to be rather endemic, seems to be rather prevalent throughout the world. So this is clearly an area that warrants investigation and hard work, and which is why actually what you see reflected in the Horizon Europe calls that I was presenting, you see that both of these aspects have been, we put them forward because we know we need more research and work. One is on the consumption side, the other is on measurement and reduction of food losses.
Thank you. Could you say anything about how you, again, in your opinion, how you will proceed to mitigate a lot of the food loss at the retail or at the personal level? I mean,
well, okay, at the retail level, certainly a lot of work has been ongoing in recent years, and some member states, I don't know if you're aware, if you've looked at this, but some member states, few, have taken a legislative approach. So this is the case for France, and I think the Czech Republic has recently, in a way, implemented similar legislation where they oblige retailers to have formal agreements with food banks in order to ensure that any surplus from their shelves goes to food banks and charity organizations. But other countries have been equally successful in this practice through voluntary agreements. Voluntary agreements to reduce food waste, and this is achieved through really concerted action, cooperation, where in a way government brings together the actors and brokers these agreements, where targets are set for each stage of the food supply chain, and that has shown to be quite successful. At the consumption stage, there's so much work ongoing, but maybe to give you maybe a little, not my personal view, but some maybe evidence-based answer would be, I guess I can refer back to the findings from the Refresh project, which had a work package specifically on consumer behavior, and their learning was that we need to help consumers build again their food management skills, that this is a key area that needs to be done. So a lot of practical information that needs to be given, and that one of the learnings also from that research is that just simply raising awareness and talking about, okay, food waste negative impacts, be it climate or other, are not sufficient and actually could turn some consumers away from taking action. So I think the learning there is that we really need to take targeted approaches. We need to understand, a bit like industry does when they're marketing a product. We really need to understand who we're trying to target and make sure we have the right messages and the right programs and the right tools to help people reduce food waste. But a lot of that also is about when we speak about changing social norms is, you know, can we reach can we evolve public perception in a way that, for instance, in future, just as today, it's not acceptable to drink and drive, you know, can it be not acceptable in future, hopefully in the not too distant future, to throw away food? I mean, that's I think also an avenue that researchers and practitioners are trying to investigate through this Consumer Food Waste Forum that we're establishing. It's a pilot project that's going to run for 2 years. We really are wanting to have some cross-fertilization between the academics and those who are implementing programs on the ground in order to gauge, you know, well, what is working and can we transfer this learning as quickly as possible in order to help everyone implement effective strategies.
Thank you very much.
Other questions? How long more? Yes.
You talked about drinking and driving because it's for people is aware about self-awareness, take care of themselves and not to get themselves too dangerous. And health awareness, for example, people want to eat more fresh foods and unprocessed food. That means I'm wondering, is it be increasing or decrease if I want fresh and unprocessed food, that means it will increase food waste because I want fresh food all times. So I think that people want more and more. fresh food and unprocessed food. So I think it is not folk stopped to drive when drinking because they think about themselves. But now folks thinks about, I don't want to eat foods that's old or processed because it is not good to my health. So how can we, okay, my question is, what, how can farm to fork contribute to reduce food waste, increasing demand on fresh food and unprocessed food?
Okay, I'm not sure I absolutely understood. Were you thinking that the need or citizens wanting to eat more fresh food, unprocessed food could somehow generate more food waste? Is that what you're saying? Or did I?
Yeah, I think it generates more food waste.
I don't know. Do you think so? I don't know if we have necessarily any. Do we have evidence of that?
Is it because if I want fresh and unprocessed food, then maybe I don't know, but I think, isn't it? I'm asking, I'm wondering.
Okay, I don't know. I'm not aware myself of any evidence that would quantify, that would say that, you know, people eating more fresh food, unprocessed food, that somehow that would lead to more food waste. I mean, I think if you're thinking that maybe, are you thinking maybe because of shelf life, because the food
because of shelf life.
Yeah. Yes, well, I think what you're saying is a bit linked to maybe what was found in the Refresh project, is that we have lost, or maybe we I don't know if we've lost, but we don't have, some of us don't have the same food management skills maybe that our parents had or our grandparents had. So we need to learn more about food, and we need to learn more about, okay, if I've purchased too many, I don't know what, green beans, and I can't eat them fresh, well, maybe I can use them and cook them in a different way and still eat them and not throw them away. Or maybe what I need to do is to change my purchasing patterns and you know, perhaps go to the store more frequently and buy less. Maybe perhaps one thing that might reassure you is that there are countries that have done some research in the context of COVID in the last year and a half, when we all found ourselves at home with more time. People have spent more time actually buying food, preparing food, planning their meals. And some countries have research actually that is showing that this has had a positive impact on food waste reduction, because people have becoming more aware and also had more time to devote to meal preparation. Now the question is, so behavior change, and then can we maintain that behavior? That's the question. But there's some interesting research which is ongoing right now in the UK, and also in countries in the EU that are investigating this. Netherlands, for instance, as people do spend more time in thinking about the food that they purchase and what to do with it and how to consume it, etc. So, yeah, but it's a good question. Thank you.
Yes, and I will add on a little bit on that, because this is very interesting dilemmas, I think you are touching, because it's also about the individual, it's about health and nutrition, and about climate and waste. So it's a lot of dilemmas in this, and I think the farm to fork strategy also says, or the action plan says, to facilitate more reformulation of food, but that goes to the health part again. So I think it's very interesting dilemmas, and also what to be on the front face packaging, on what consumers want. And
so there's a very nice link actually on nutrition, because you see, if you have the right portion size for your nutritional needs, you can also avoid food waste. You know, so, I mean, there's been projects also in that area, because as the hospitality sector, for instance, what restaurants propose on your plate, if you're given a serving size of meat, which is huge, that's not good for your nutritional. It's too much energy. It's too much. So it can lead also to overweight, obesity, or whatever. But also it means that if you don't eat it, you're going to waste very valuable food. So there have been some interesting work bringing together for citizens integrated messages, bringing these together. Yeah.
This is very interesting topic.
Yes, it is. It's for a long time.
So thank you very much for staying some minutes over time, and thank you for the very nice dialogue, and I learned a lot. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you for your interest. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Hello, Trondheim. We don't hear you. Here you are. We invite you because you are in such a social environment. We see all of you smiling, talking, chatting, you know. So there is a bit of invite here, apart the fact that finally we are also having real speakers in the room. Now we are going to for the final session. Is everyone in the room, Eva?
Yes.
Yeah, so we can start. So final session of the day. I hope you found this interesting. As of now, I see the students are still not falling asleep, which is very, very important. I see even someone smiling. That's excellent. So the final speaker of the day is, let's say, from the other side of the barricade, if you want. No, we have had people from the Commission presenting their work, the policies in the sector, and so on. And now we are going to have the stakeholders side for one of the most controversial political things currently in Brussels. Please take into account that I can say this because the next speaker is a friend. The Commission didn't accept to be a speaker here, mostly because this is very currently delicate politically in Brussels. So they don't want to go in public presentation talking about the labeling. And this is why I'm very grateful to Paolo for accepting our invitation and provide the status of the labeling reform. And maybe we can also share some insider information with our students, whatever you think appropriate that can be shared also from the lobby point of view. So for you to also understand what is boiling behind the doors. I don't know, Paolo, if I exposed you too much or not.
I will try to give a picture of the situation and not from my corner, but generally.
Of course, I know that you are going to be balanced, but if you want also to give something, let's say, of real life, you are free to do it, and will be, I think, an interesting experience to be shared. So, without losing too much time, I would like to thank a lot Paolo Patruno, which is the Deputy Secretary General of CLITRAVI, and CLITRAVI is the liaison center for the meat processing industry in the European Union. So meat production is in focus here, and as I am the director of the show, I can move the camera directly to Paolo. Paolo, let me introduce you the leader of the course, which is Eva Polk, our professor from Natural Science faculty. Eva, Paolo, Eva. I don't know, Eva, if you want to spend some words of welcome from your side as well.
Yes, thank you very much for joining us here in Norway. Looking forward to your presentation, and this will be a new perspective maybe for us. So I really appreciate that you are meeting us, a master student in a sustainability food master course. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to your presentation. And you will probably get some questions in the end.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation.
Okay, so we share the presentation and we start.
We can move directly to the.
First, you have to launch the presentation media. Launch and share.
Okay.
Okay.
Second, third, it's the fourth slide. It should be next. Okay. From this one. So thank you very much. Thank you, Massimo, and it's a pleasure to be here with you. As I told already to Massimo, I will keep, we can say, a balanced vision on the whole topic, especially on labeling, because there is a war ongoing on nutrition labeling, and so I will try to give you the picture, explaining both the parties that are now fighting on nutrition labeling without expressing any judgment on one or the other party. So First of all, I want to introduce you a little bit my organization. So we represent the meat processing industry in the European Union. It's we can say, one of the last part of the livestock chain. So we have slaughterhouses in under our umbrella. We represent mainly pigs slaughterhouses, some also beef slaughterhouses, poultry slaughterhouses, but mainly all the meat processing chain. So the companies producing meat products, meat preparation, giving so the added value to the raw meat in the food chain. Many of you maybe heard about ham producer of foie gras, Parma ham, Belgian ham. And we represent all those companies producing those kind of food stuff. We have 26 member organizations, not only in European Union country, but also we cover Switzerland, we cover UK, so a former EU country, and we have also an organization in two organizations in Norway that are under our umbrella. So I know very well your country, and that's a double pleasure to be here today. We are member of other organizations, so Food Drink Europe, which is the Confederation of Food Industry, representing the European food industry, International Meat Secretariat, so the global livestock organization. And since a couple of years, we are founders of the European Livestock Voice, which is an informal group that is trying to balance the debate on the livestock chain in order to put on the table some elements that are not always taken into account when it comes to regulate the livestock chain. Our main interests are nutrition and health, so something that we will see better during my presentation. Product safety and hygiene. Food safety for us is our key asset, and we used to say that food safety comes first. Many technical aspects related to food legislation, environmental sustainability, which is now a vital topic for our sector, economical aspects, so everything related to the supply chain, the markets, the trend of the market of commodities, and so on, and animal welfare, which is another topic. I know that today you had an insight also on animal welfare, and so you can understand a little bit more the scope. Next slide, please. In Europe, the meat processing sector is a very important sector. Within the Confederation of Food Industry, we are one of the main, we can say, pillar in terms of annual turnover. And in Europe, even if now the market is a little bit declining, in 2016, people spent $89 billion in processed meat products. The per capita consumption of processed meat in Europe was 8.5 kilograms in 2016. Now our sector is facing a lot of challenges, not only in the framework of the transition, but also in terms of market, in terms of comparison with third countries. There are third countries, especially when it comes to fresh meat. So the slaughterhouses are confronted with the slaughterhouses in the third countries and with production in the third countries. So they are trying to be to face this competition. And on the other side, when it comes to our core business, the processed meat product, we see that there are many trends and many also differences within the EU market. So we have some countries where the own brands, the products that beer and are sold on the market under the trademark of companies producing them are more appreciated, while there are some other countries where private label is products made under the trademark of retailer chain are more performance. So companies are confronted with those to market on brand or private labels. This is one of the main challenge for the company which is in the meat processing business. On the other side, there are some trends related to how to position, and this is also something which is different from country to country, where to position if on the dairy meat products, so top level products, or if on we can say cheap product, accessible and affordable for everybody. And when it comes to this thing, there is also a new challenge, that is how to translate into opportunities the challenge of alternative proteins. So you know, there is a huge debate on alternative protein, plant-based food, cultured meat, so the meat produced in the so-called lab meat, and how to get profit of those new opportunities, how to get profit of these challenges and translate them into opportunities, but keeping alive a sector that is fully integrated into the traditional European culinary culture. So if someone is also going in this direction, there is the other, there is the pro that the market would absorb these kind of products, but on the other side, they could lose the traditional side of what they were doing. So these are the main challenges that our sector is facing into this year. Next slide, please. Among those challenges, there is the big challenge of the farm to fork strategy. I say that it can be an opportunity for the whole sector, even if at the very beginning the sector was confronted with some parts of the strategy that was somehow creating, especially on a narrative point of view, some concerns inside the livestock chain. So going to the farm to fork strategy, I think that the other speakers already explained you, but it is an exercise that would like to keep three main pillars in one single strategy. So to include in one roadmap, social sustainability, environmental sustainability, and economic sustainability. And these three pillars should be perfectly balanced one with the other. And we will see that somehow on the other side, from the processor side, this is a huge concern, because we see the trend to move into the social and the environmental sustainability, and not to keep into account the environment, the economic sustainability at all. Next slide, please. The first concern is due mainly to a lack of a general impact assessment that anticipating the farm to fork strategy, which means that the legislator, mainly the European, namely the European Commission, did not carry a general impact assessment which could have evaluated on a long-term, short and long-term perspective, the economical impact of the farm to fork strategy, which is a very important exercise to understand the direction where the legislation should go at the end of the day. Because if you see and you are confronted with a huge impact, you try also to understand exactly the direction that you should take. The problem of the farm to fork is that there is this lack of a general impact assessment, and we saw in the last months also a study from the JRC, so something coming out the European Commission too, that underlined some problems in this lack of a general impact assessment. So a cost of transition that could at the end of the day be transferred in higher cost for consumer and not to taken into duly account. So it's something that also in the European Parliament, which vote or had a long discussions, and the Agri and Envy Committee of the European Parliament expressed their point of view last week with a vote on a report joint report of the Envy and Agri Committee expressed the view that a general impact assessment should be something that would complete the strategy in order to let all the stakeholders understand exactly where the situation could go, and also to introduce some, we can say, corrective to the farm to fork strategy in case the strategy is too much ambitious, or if it would go too much far away in some specific areas of the strategy. The European Council too expressed its view on the farm to fork strategy, and so now coming to the general debate, the last we can say part of the debate here in Brussels on the general strategy, then we can see that on the action plan it will last years and years and years, the implementation of the farm to fork strategy. It's the discussion, the debate, and the approval of the report of the Envy and Agri Committee in the European plenary sitting that is for the forecast put this vote in October 2nd, the session which will be at the end of October. Next slide, please. So going to the concrete aspects that I should face in my presentation, I will focus on health and diet aspect of the farm to fork strategy, and then on labeling, food labeling reform that is based on the farm to fork strategy. So mainly both the topics and roots that are going behind in a timeline. So what we see on the table today is not something that was born last year with the farm to fork strategy, but it's a long-lasting process, which where many different voices were confronted on the table, and where there is a strong also influence from the development at the United Nations and WHO level. So we can say that all the farm to fork strategy, when it comes to health and diet, it's something that was developed based on development of debates at the global level, debates at the European Union level, but also the some societal challenges that were taken into account when it was the case to come out with a strategy, we can say an inclusive and holistic strategy as the farm to fork is. So we see that some concepts that we found in the farm to fork strategy were also present in a communication, a white paper on a strategy for Europe on nutrition, which is dated 2017, where overweight and obesity were taken into account as strictly connected with the diet, or we should say with the lack of education which impacted the diet. It's for sure something when it comes to diet, education is a very important matter, but also what you can find into the market, the choices that supermarket retail chains give you can somehow influence also your diet. And so the European Commission started thinking about how to improve foods which is available for consumer into the market. And this strategy, white paper on a strategy for Europe on nutrition, overweight and obesity related health issues, tried to put a first brick in order to involve a cooperation between the private sector and public sector in order to deliver foods that would have contributed to better diets of European consumers. To this extent, also a EU platform was established, the EU platform for diet, physical activity and health, where in the high-level group on nutrition and physical activity part of this exercise, reformulation were encouraged in order to give once more to consumer food which was healthier and could have contributed with less intake of some nutrients that were considered very dangerous inside the debate. So normally during this debate, calories salt, sugar, fats, saturated fats were identified as nutrients where the intake should have kept limited for consumer. And so the European Union started to encourage the reformulation, so cut off those nutrients into the products available into the market, but also to give consumer an instrument to understand the intake of those products. And that's why in the regulation on food labeling, regulation 1169/2012, it was introduced the mandatory nutrition labeling with some exceptions, but generally speaking, more or less all the processed prepared food should be at this mandatory nutrition labeling, starting from 13th of December 2014. At the time, I want to say during the debate, some political groups and some NGOs were also advocating to have a mandatory front of pack nutrition labeling with a traffic light displayed into the packaging of prepackaged food. So something that now we are confronted of was already advocated during the discussion of regulation on food labeling in 2009, 2010. So during those years, at the end of the day, the European Parliament decided to vote against the traffic light. And so Article 35 was the compromise. Article 35, we will see then under the food labeling part, is the roots of many front of pack systems that are now in place in the European Union. Some years before, the legislator in the regulation 1924/2006 on nutrition and health claims decided to put some limits to the promotion of products through nutrition and health claims. So nutrition claim is when I say that the product has less calories, less salt, light. When you see all those, we can say statement, they are normally going under the nutrition claims legislation. While health claims are those claims, so those statements which are promoting the product as suitable for maintaining specific function of our body. And so they are a close number of health claims which are authorized by the European Union with the EFSA analysis before the authorization. So normally you made application, European Commission consult EFSA. If EFSA gives green light, these health claims can normally be used. In order to prevent the circulation of food, the so-called unhealthy food, with a statement that could have encouraged consumers to consume more of those food, the European Union decided to put some limits to the possibility to bear both nutrition and health claim. And those limits were called the nutrient profile. So basically, by 2009, which was the date nutrient profile should have been implemented, to bear nutrition and health claims, food products should have respected some requirements in terms of presence and quantities of specific nutrients like salt, fat, saturated fat, trans fatty acids, sugar, the role of those products in the overall diet, and the overall nutrition composition of those products. So the three of those components should have given to the product a specific score, and under a specific score, it was possible to bear nutrition or health claims. Upper to certain threshold, it was not possible to promote the product with both nutrition or health claims. So at the very beginning, nutrient profiles were only to restrict the marketing of those, the promotion, we can say, of specific products which were outside a certain nutrient profile. Nowadays, in the debate, we will see that the nutrient profile is the concept of nutrient profile went a little bit far away, and it can influence also food labeling, because when we have a system like Nutri-Score or we have traffic light, at the end of the day, it results in a nutrient profiling of food. So that's why there was a huge battle, and nutrient profiles were never be implemented by the European Union due to this big debate, where some stakeholders on one side didn't want to have nutrient profiles into the market because could have been a system to jeopardize specific food categories, while on the other side, the promotion of other food stuff was which was compliant with the nutrient profile. So even if the nutrient profile seemed to be very good for those products, could not have been defined as healthy products. So this big debate influenced the fact that nutrient profile had not yet been implemented by the European Commission. We see that other steps on the Farm to Fork strategy, the EU Action Plan on Childhood Obesity 2014-2020, where the European Union started thinking about the restriction of marketing and advertising to children. The Council conclusion on nutrition and physical activity 2014, where the ministries of health recommended an alignment with WHO policies. Next slide, please. And we will see that at the global level, obesity was a real big concern, started to be a big concern, especially when we are confronted with other food systems, like the South American food system, the US food system, where the diet is completely different. The rate of obesity is higher than in the European Union. So the recommendation of WHO were mainly focusing on a global scale. Even if the European office of the WHO started to push and to become more pushy at the EU level to implement nutrient profiling, to introduce taxes on specific categories of foodstuff, to encourage reformulation, to encourage restriction of advertisement on specific food categories, as it will be the case starting from 2022 in UK, where food high in salt and sugar will be not promoted to children no more during the television show. So we see that the WHO started to become more and more concerned due to the links between malnutrition and obesity also in the European market. Even if, I repeat, the WHO concerns were also due to a huge pressure at the global level on specific problems as obesity. In any case, the WHO made many other recommendations, also in guidelines on specific nutrients and food, where the focus was more on specific food and nutrients. And we see that due to the pressure of WHO that was also used by NGOs at the European level to lobby in a certain way, the concept, if the Commission in 2010-2011, during the high-level group on nutrition and health, during the within the EU platform for diet, physical activity and health, was more concerned on health and lifestyle, on diet and lifestyle. The situation shifted a little bit more far away, and so from diet the focus was on specific foods and specific nutrients.
Go.
Okay, so we see that the influence of the WHO somehow was also influencing the landscape of the European debate with the Farm to Fork, that at the end of the day was taking duly into account this shifting into the debate. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development was another milestone that influenced another milestone at the global level, which was able to influence the outcome of the Farm to Fork strategy. We have another very important step, Cora, that is the NOVA classification system of FAO. In the NOVA classification, food were divided into 4 categories. So non-processed food, light processed food, and ultra-processed food stuff. And the FAO in this classification launched a big alert on ultra-processed food. Then in the debate also, there were a lot of private initiatives like the Eat Lancet report, which started to focus on specific food category, reduction of certain nutrients, reduction of certain food category. Next slide, please. And this is where we arrive with Farm to Fork strategy that is proposing some pillars: healthy people, healthy society, and a healthy planet. So the 3 dimensions of sustainability. Recognizing that half of the adult population is overweight, contributing to high prevalence of diet-related diseases and related healthcare costs. So what can be the recipe? The recipe should be ensuring food safety, nutrition, and public health. So mixing in the standard of environmental improvement of products, also a nutrition improvement of products. So stimulating sustainable food processing, also retail, hospitality, and food service practices. This was one of the pillars in this strategy: is mandatory front of pack nutrition labeling, setting up nutrient profile to restrict the promotion of food, so not only via nutrition and health plan, but in a wider perspective of food high in fat, sugars, and salt, adapting marketing and advertising, promoting some specific food categories, so less animal proteins, more vegetable proteins. These are the lines where Farm to Fork strategy is trying to conditioning the diet of European citizenship and also the market of food stuff. Next slide, please. But there are also other aspects: research and innovation, technology and investment, the promotion of global transition, so also promoting in debates and discussion with trading partners the 3 pillars of sustainability, also in international debate, and promoting sustainable food consumption, facilitating the shift to healthy, sustainable diets. This should pass also, according to the debates that nowadays are on the table at the European Union level, through taxation of specific foodstuff and reduction of VAT for other foodstuffs. So all grains, cereals, fruit and vegetables, legumes, and nuts should be encouraged with the also facilitation and market advantages that should be promoted also from a public perspective. While on the other side, there is a strong push to introduce specific measures not to encourage the consumption of those foods which are, according to the strategy, related to obesity and diseases. Next slide, please. So we see that in the action plan, there are some actions that should be dedicated to this aspect. The EU Code of Conduct for Responsible Business and Marketing, which was finalized in June and signed in July and presented to the pre-summit in Rome, the UN System pre-summit. Before the end of the day, initiative to stimulate reformulation of processed food should also come, should also be promoted by the European Commission. Mandatory criteria for sustainable food procurement. So those measures where also the public authority should encourage the shifting towards specific nutrition patterns. Clarification of competition rule with regard to sustainability in order to use also instruments at national level to encourage the consumption and to give a competitive advantage to specific food categories. Proposal for harmonized front of pack nutrition labeling, set nutrient profile to restrict promotion of food high in salt, sugar, and of fat, origin labeling, and date marking. Next slide, please. Next one. Yeah, we can jump to the next one. So when it comes to food labeling, we see that it is one of the, it is mentioned in the action plan, and it is mentioned several times in the Farm to Fork strategy. So we have a regulation that was approved in 2018, 2011. It was published on the official journal the 13th December of 2011, and it entered into application on 13 December 2014. Starting from December 2016, nutrition labeling became mandatory, and the regulation provides clear, harmonized presentation of allergens. It also foresees certain nutrition information for the majority of pre-packed processed food. As I told you during the parliamentary discussion, traffic light was rejected, but in the debate, the compromise was Article 35, which states that in addition to the form of expression per 100 grams, so the nutrition, the so-called nutrition table, nutrition declaration, the energy value and the amount of nutrients may be given by other form of expression and or presented using geographical forms or symbols in addition to the words or numbers, provided that the following requirements are met. So there are specific requirements. Those information, those systems, we can say, front of pack should not mislead consumer, should be developed under consultation of stakeholder, should facilitate consumer understanding, should be supported by scientifically valid evidence, and should be objective and non-discriminatory, and their application should not create obstacles to the free movement of goods. Next slide, please. Nowadays, these are the systems that are confronted into the market. So we have the reference intakes label, which was something that was developed by the food industry during the years in order to give much clarity to consumer, but it was not considered enough during the debate, especially by NGOs, which asked to go a little bit far away. In Italy, the debate gave birth to Nutriform battery, which is a system which should give at first glance some information on how the foodstuff is contributing to the daily amount of nutrients which are required by people. But also this one is somehow considered not enough. The UK front of pack labeling, which gives a specific rate, so green to if nutrients are presented below certain threshold, yellow, orange if the thresholds are a little higher, and red when it is not advisable to consume food. But these are considered for 100 grams of food. So the paradox is that certain kind of food like olive oil, as an example, or other foodstuff that were not consumed normally in 100 grams were classified as red, despite the real consumption in the overall daily diet. So this is the main criticism to the traffic light. Then there are other systems, especially the Nordic labeling system, like the Keyhole, the health logos, the healthy choices, which combined giving a sort of price to specific products which are complying with nutritional and both environmental requirements, but they are considered not enough in the debate because they give only a positive evaluation, but when the products are not, should not have normally a positive score, those symbols are not appearing on the products. So, and the Nutri-Score, which is under a huge debate because it combines with an algorithm the intake for 100 grams, again, the intake of good, the so-called good and bad nutrients. So if it should take into account how much protein, how much vitamins, how much you can say fibers there are for 100 grams compared with how much salt, sugar, calories we have in 100 grams. So giving the score, the positive or negative according to the prevalence of those nutrients into 100 grams of food again. There is, it was recommended by some countries, France, Belgium, Netherlands, and there is a steering group now with 6 countries plus Switzerland, 7, which are analyzing how to change a little bit the score and the algorithm of Nutri-Score. As an example, the algorithm was changed for the olive oil, which was at the beginning red, now it's yellow, is a C score. So we see that it was not born as the best instrument, but there are some attempts to ameliorate the system, to improve the system, even if there is still a huge criticism, especially for the reference to 100 grams, which keeps many foodstuff in a red area despite the real consumption in the overall diet. Next slide, please. So where we are now, the farm to fork strategy, when the farm to fork strategy was published, the same day the European Commission published a report where confirmed the potential of front of pack schemes without saying one is better than the other, to help consumers make health conscious food choices and recognizing a strong link between nutrient profile and front of pack nutrition labeling. So for the first time, there is a public recognition that nutrient profile should go a little bit farther than regulation on nutrition and health claims. So not only restriction of health and nutrition claim on foodstuff, but also used to classification of foodstuff to give consumer some advices if food should be advisable to be consumed or not. That is something going a little bit far away from the big first ideas of nutrient profile. So the farm to fork strategy is asking for proposal for harmonized mandatory front of pack nutrition labeling, set nutrient profile to restrict promotion of food high in salt, sugar, and or fat, origin labeling, that is another thing, and date marking. These are the 4 requirements of the farm to fork strategy to be implemented in the coming years in the policy debate. Next slide, next one again, next. So which are the option, the policy option on the table? Some months ago in December, the European Commission launched an inception impact assessment. So they consulted the stakeholders on a roadmap to come out with a proposal in the coming years, 2022. And the option on the table where stakeholders were consulted were option 0, baseline, so keep the situation as it is, and the maximum is to implement a nutrient profile only in the framework of regulation 1924-2006, so only for nutrition and health claim, as it was required by that regulation. Option 1, nutrient specific label numerical, so like the battery or the reference intake. Second option, nutrient specific labels color coded, so the system of traffic light. Summary label, endorsement logos, like the Nordic systems, or option 4, graded indicators like the Nutri-Score, which is going a little bit far away. All those 4 options from 1 to 4 are in any case requiring implementation of nutrient profile outside regulation 1924, so with a broader scope. Next slide, please. But coming on food labeling reform, there are also other aspects. Origin labeling. So the European Union should come out with a proposal to extend the mandatory origin labeling on certain food categories. So going a little bit far away from now. Now the only nutrition labeling is mandatory origin labeling is required only for specific foodstuff when they are sold, like honey, like fresh pig meat, fresh beef, fresh poultry, chilled or frozen. And the idea, or ingredients, origin labeling for ingredients is required when you give the origin of the foodstuff and the origin of its primary ingredient, it's different than the one of food. So if I say made in Belgium, and as an example, I have ham made in Belgium with pig meat that is coming from the Netherlands. Normally, I should write the origin of the ingredients by stating that with primary ingredient not coming from Belgium, or primary ingredient from EU, or primary ingredient from the Netherlands. So I have a certain flexibility as food business operator, but I should declare that the primary ingredient origin is different than the one of the final product. Only if I declare the origin to consumer in order not to mislead consumer. Now the Farm to Fork is asking a step more. So in the consultation, the options were 5. One, again, the baseline, so the business as usual, doing nothing. First option, mandatory origin labeling provided at EU, non-EU level. So for certain specific food categories, for example, in the idea of the European Commission, there should be milk and meat. And if I may, I produce a cheese with the milk coming from another country, I should, with milk, I should say that the milk is from EU, non-EU, or I should give the mandatory origin at national level of milk. So I should say milk coming from, if I produce in Belgium, despite irrespective if I declare or not the origin, I should say milk from Belgium, milk from Netherlands, milk from outside Europe, wherever we want. So it's the option 2. The option 3 is mandatory origin indication provided at the regional level. I should say that it is quite not a probable option. So during the consultation, it was seen as a very difficult option. Or option 4, mix the option based on a mix of elements from all options. So like as it is now for the declaration of primary ingredient when origin is given, that there is quite a flexibility from the food business operator. And this is also something that is arriving very late, because in the meantime, many member states issued the national legislation on origin labeling of ingredients. Some of them were not even notified, and the European Commission in this respect as it should have acted as guardian of the treaties. So for those countries which were not notifying, it was a breach of the European legislation, but no infringement was opened by the European Commission on those countries. So the only thing is now working on harmonization at EU level. We hope that there will be harmonization, and especially that all the national rules, once the landscape will be harmonized, will disappear, because nowadays with different rules within several European Union countries, quite a little bit tricky thing, and it's also a barrier to trade for European companies. The European Court of Justice recognized as an example that the first decree, the French decree on origin of milk, was adopted outside the rules of European Union, and so they, the European Court of Justice recognized that the national decrees basically are not founded on the pillars that they should be founded in order to be compliant with the European Regulation 1169. Date marking, it's last thing on food labeling reform. So in order to prevent, I knew that there was before a discussion on food waste. In order to prevent food waste, and especially food wastage, there is a discussion, an ongoing discussion, to revise date marking with some options on the mark, on the table, in order to give consumer with instruments in order to consume specific foods, especially the ones with where it is applied the best before. even if the food best before date expired and the food, the studies recognize that many of those food were still suitable for consumption, and so they pose a problem in terms of food waste. The 4 options on the table are analyzing whether it is possible to mix and combine a reduction of food wastage with the need of respect of food safety measures. So that's all. Thank you very much, and I'm here to answer to your question. It's a very, very huge topic, so I tried to summarize it into a few words, but I know that we could spend one entire day and we only could have seen just a small quantity of information.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. You have covered this area perfectly for us, and I appreciate it that you share all this information, and I have learned a lot. And I'm not sure if we have time for questions now, because there are some students in the corridor waiting to come in. I think they have should have the room in 5 minutes or so. But if you have any questions that you really want to ask him, then you can, maybe, if you have time for one question, if you have. Not? Okay. Yeah, then I can ask you one question. I had to look at my notes. But how do you work to influence the food policy?
So the main, we can say, the main tool that we are using to influence, influence is a word that I think it's overestimate my job. There is no, rather than influence, it's just to help and shape the debate, because normally it's the debate. So first of all, we have to understand that in the last years, due to the development of information for social media and so on, information are circulated very quickly, and there is a huge amount of information available for consumers, for policymakers, for everybody. In many cases, those information are not accurate. We see that there are information which are somehow simplifying the picture and creating there are fake news. So it's plenty of the landscape in terms of debate. It's quite difficult to be faced. So first of all, the first thing is to clean the debate. When we see that we are confronted with information that are not accurate, as an association, we try first of all to inform policymakers about the real picture and about the situation, giving and providing other scientific information on the other side. And we work always with scientific information. So we work with scientific researches, we work with scientific data, we work with data also taken by daily operation of our companies, because we have the advantage to and we have the benefit of data coming directly from companies, which can help us to make the picture a little bit more fitting to the reality. In other cases, we work also on an internal perspective. When there is a problem, which is a fair problem, which is a real problem, we try to work and to develop internal debate in order to improve the sector. So if there is a problem that it's real, we work to see to the public authority, to the Commission, to the European institution, that we are on their side and working to improve the situation. The third thing is when it comes to legislation, that is, we give our point of view. So we participate to the consultation, we participate to several working groups, we provide a lot of technical materials. This morning, as an example, I took part in a meeting where we were speaking about a food trade agreement with a third country, where the Commission wanted to understand from our point of view and our perspective if we had defensive or offensive interests. So these are also part at the end of the day of the debate. But also when it comes at the end of the day to new legislation, we prepare some papers, always with scientific background, and we try to engage with the authority in order to let them understand the impact.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thank you very much, but now they are looking.
It's a very, very difficult.
Meeting. So thank you very much, and thank you from Brussels today. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Massimo said you had an emergency.